Joining us right now on the phones, Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing well, man.
Good.
To be with.
Good. Glad to have you on the show. Well, I was just getting into the high school kids who marched yesterday and got out of class for about 17 minutes. One of the things that the Senate did yesterday, or I'm sorry, it was the House. Excuse me. Y'all passed a school safety bill. Talk to our listeners a little bit about that and how that is responding to what happened in Florida.
Well, I think that it's important for all of us to ask the question, what can be done, and what can be done that will actually get at the problem. One would be to make sure that dangerous people don't get guns, and even that's hard to do. We need a database that works. We need a background check system that works. However, 80% of crimes committed with guns are committed with guns that were obtained illegally. They were bought on the black market or they were stolen. So even that is obviously not feels safe. And then the other piece is to secure schools. And so this STOP Act was led by one of my freshman colleagues who's a former sheriff from Jacksonville, Florida, and it just provides, and this is, I'd like to get rid of the Department of Education. I think that's a state and local issue, but I do think this is an appropriate use of federal funds to help some of these, especially rural schools that are resource strapped, to make sure that we can partner by allowing them to get the tools and technologies they need to harden the security of the school, to better coordinate with local law enforcement, to have early intervention systems like anonymous tip lines that are managed through social media. So there's some things that we can do. Ultimately, I think what Texas is doing to allow teachers to be trained, to be part of that security infrastructure, to be able to responsibly carry and be armed so that they are, in fact, an effective last line of defense. I know that I would feel safer if my child were at a school where they allowed for such a program. And I'm glad Texas does that, but that should be a state and local school district choice, not a federal government mandate.
Do you see the House passing anything else on the issue of guns or school safety anytime soon?
Well, I would like for the reciprocity bill to pass. It has the fixed NICS, that's the National Instant Background Check System. I do think we need to hold federal and state agencies accountable for putting the data in the database. I mean, we either believe that's appropriate or not. I do, and I think we need to hold people accountable, and that's part of it. The other is letting people carry their guns who are permitted to carry across state lines. I think that is also part of the security.
Congressman, we had someone who texted in, and I imagine this bill will not be going anywhere. It's according to the texter, H.R. 5103, tax increase on guns and ammo. I don't see that one going anywhere. What about yourself?
That's not going anywhere. I would oppose that vehemently, as I would oppose other gun control measures, whether it's raising the age from 18 to 21 or you just name it. I mean, that's not, we've talked before, the issue is not make it harder for the good guys to protect themselves and their communities. That is not the answer to this. And so, yeah, I would oppose that, and that's not going anywhere.
What message would you send to, because yesterday you did have high school kids who were marching, and I think some of them were were honestly marching and are scared of guns or scared of the Second Amendment or whatever it may be. Others, I think, this was pushed by some on the left, and this wasn't completely organic what we saw yesterday. But what message would you send to youth about the Second Amendment and about gun violence in the United States?
Well, I can appreciate people and their right to express their views, and I certainly know that young people are concerned about school shootings, as they should be. I mean, this is a dangerous place, a fallen world, and that's part of government exists to restrain evil. But we also live in a country where we have a fundamental right to protect ourselves from not just bad people but bad governments. So I would just say that people, I understand what they want. I think we all want the same thing, which is safer schools. But what I would tell them is that if a person wants to go on a murderous rampage, they will stop at nothing, and they will have any weapon of choice to carry it out. And the last line of defense in this country against the bad guys that get the weapons is the good guys being ready and armed with equal or greater force. And I just think that's something we can't compromise or negotiate away. And if we do, we'll only make this a less safe and less free society, and they don't want that. And I just don't think, I think the outcome, the goal, the long-term safer schools, safer environments, safer communities, we all want that. It's just about how we go about it to effectively achieve that.
When we're going to go ahead and take the break. When we come back, we have much more to get into, including an article yesterday from Politico over the Farm Bill, when we return with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Congressman Jodey Arrington joining us this morning for one more segment. And Congressman, a story yesterday from Politico, the headline, "Food Stamp Proposal Infuriates Both Left and Right," on this Politico article. Talks about, and I know you've brought up stricter work requirements. And this article talks about Chairman Mike Conaway and the Democrats publicly revolting last week over this. And according to this article, it says that this could could derail the House Farm Bill. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the chairman is trying to do the right thing and reform a big component of our welfare system. Most all of which is flawed because the incentives keep people trapped in a cycle of poverty and dependency. And so what we like to say from the outset is everybody ought to enjoy the blessing of a good, hard, honest day's work. That's just good for the soul. And then, we need to make sure that we have a safety net, not a hammock, so that people don't make a lifestyle out of it. And that we have 6 million surplus jobs. I mean, this economy is humming now. We are growing. We've seen more job participation rates increase. We've seen over 30 years the greatest increase, lowest unemployment in 50 years. All these metrics that are off the charts in terms of the economy growing again. And we need to get people off the sidelines, and we need them to work and contribute. And I think that you're going to have resistance from Democrats who somehow think that is, I guess, mean-spirited. I don't know. I don't understand, because to me, everybody ought to participate. And if you're able-bodied, you need to be in the workforce and pulling your weight. That's just good policy. Not to mention we're $21 trillion in debt. And we need to move that needle, probably more than any single issue affecting the future of this country.
So how would, under proposals that you've seen, how would the work requirements get stricter than what they currently are right now?
Well, they have allowed the states, to waive them. In fact, most states, they were waived during the Obama era. We doubled the rolls of food stamps. And in certain states, Chad, they piloted work requirements for able-bodied people. For example, in Alabama, they did this, and between January 1 and May, these counties that implemented the pilot went from 5,500 people on the food stamp rolls to 800. And in Maine, they did the same thing, saved $8 million in a quarter. 75% decline when they implemented this in Kansas. So, if you get the incentives right, you can have a safety net that helps people when they fall on tough times. By the way, I think most of that should be managed by states and local, community organizations, quite frankly. But I think this is a huge improvement if we can get able-bodied folks to have work requirements. Bill Clinton did this in the welfare to work reforms in the 90s. And so we're just, Democrats like Bill Clinton, there's a history there where there was consensus across party lines that this was the right thing to do for our country and for our fellow countrymen who are, again, trapped in this cycle of dependency that we created.
Visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show. Want to ask you about broadband access. Apparently, Secretary Sonny Perdue was talking about expanding within this infrastructure package that the president wants and that maybe Congress will come up with, that he would like to see broadband access expanded to more rural areas. Is that something you hear anything on when you go out and speak to folks in our more rural counties?
I do, Chad, because the broadband infrastructure or access to high-speed internet is the technological underpinnings for healthcare, as an example, among other things. Education, certainly the economy. But before I ran for office, I was in technology healthcare company where we provided care through telemedicine, specialty care to places like Childress and other rural communities. But that requires that you have that infrastructure in place. And 50% of rural communities do not have adequate access to high-speed internet. So it's like the rural electrification of the 60s and the 50s and 60s. Now we need to close the digital divide, and I think this is a good, again, appropriate use and investment of federal funds because it is an interstate commerce issue, and it is a public safety issue.
Congressman, we all saw what was going on or what happened in Pennsylvania. Obviously, this was a Republican seat that went Democrat. Just barely went Democrat, but it went Democrat. Is this a warning sign for Republicans for the midterm elections?
I don't think so. I'm disappointed in the outcome, and I could give you my analysis of it, but I think there were some unique factors there that won't be in play in most of the other districts. And I think there's always an energized base in the opposition party, and we see that. We saw it in Texas. I mean, we had historic turnout, but they had a greater rate of turnout. So I think that's natural for these midterm elections when you have one party that has unified leadership from the White House through Congress. But I think the economy and what we're seeing in terms of the growth there and the opportunities and the quality of life improvement with people keeping more of their hard-earned money, as we say, I think that is what they want to be safe, and they want an opportunity for their families to improve. And that's happening under this president and under the Republican leadership in the Congress. I wish we could do more, but to have historic tax reform, to have the courts going the right direction, to have our national security being rebuilt and retooled, to have our border secured, to have those policies in place, I think at the end of the day, we're achieving the desired outcomes that we campaigned on, and I think folks are going to want to keep going down that direction.
Do you think Republicans are doing a good job selling that, though, and trying to pump up that enthusiasm among Republican voters?
Well, this guy was up in Pennsylvania was outspent 5-1. In fact, the guy he ran against spent more in the last week than our guy did the entire time. So you do have to raise the money, and you do have to get the message out. You're exactly right. We've got the right message and achievements with this economy especially, and on national security. I think the two most important issues. It is selling it, but that requires folks to get out and raise the money. And the reason I bring that up is because we're all in this together. And folks that are conservative, that like what they see and want more of this less government, stronger defense, states' rights, local control, family values, then they need to contribute to folks. And I'm not talking to myself. I'd say people all over the country, they need to make the investment in the vision for their future that they believe in, because it takes everybody. It's not just getting out to vote or putting up a sign. It's all of the above.
Now, Congressman, I know you've got to get going pretty soon, so we'll go ahead and let you go, and we appreciate you joining us today, and we'll visit with you here in a couple of weeks.
Always good to be with you, Chad. God bless.
Thank you. That's Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO.